Welcome, friends, to the third and final presentation in this seminar, The Gluten Connection. We have seen the history, we have seen some of the issues that can be brought to our bodies by the consumption of this modern wheat, and now we are entering into the last presentation. Is gluten-free good for me? Just bear in mind that when we remove, for instance, if you remove wheat from your diet, you're not just removing the gluten, you are removing quite a number of other nutrients. And you have to be aware that you're supplementing your diet with enough elements and foods that will be able to supply to you those things that are being dismissed by taking the wheat out. Okay? So we're going to talk a little bit on that as we move along. These seminars, these lectures are just designed to share valuable information with the general public. They are not to be used as a treatment for individual cases. And some of the information that we are going to present now, I don't want you to take it as a personal prescription to you. I want you to take it rather as what will Oscar do if he was gluten intolerant, or if he wanted to test that he was gluten intolerant. Okay? So this is what I will actually do if I wanted to test if I was gluten intolerant. Now, this is Dr. Rodney Ford from New Zealand. He's a professor of pediatrics, and he had this to say: I see lots of sick children and lots of them are gluten affected, but happily they get better a lot more quickly of gluten than do gluten affected adults. However, I am a strong believer in putting these children on a gluten-free diet well before they end up with substantial gluten-related harm, and to spare them from years of even decades of gluten symptoms. This means making an early diagnosis that also means putting them on a gluten-zero diet before they get the severe gut damage. So this gentleman had very big experience in the area of gluten. As a pediatrician in New Zealand, he was probably one of the pioneers of the gluten-free protocols, particularly for children. Now, some of the details escape me in this story because I read it a long time ago, but I remember Dr. Ford writing about 3 cases of 3 girls. One of them, very malnourished. She looked like celiac already. By the trained eye, she looked like celiac. The other 2 didn't look as bad, and he decided to do the celiac test to the 3 of them. Now, as he did the celiac test to the 3 of them, one of them turned up to be celiac. The other 2 didn't. And Dr. Ford did something, and he said it in his articles, that as a doctor you are not to do. If the test says that that child is not celiac, you don't take them off gluten, because that's not a problem. Do you get it? So Dr. Ford, he actually took the 3 children, the 3 girls, out of gluten. Only one of them showed to be celiac. So as a doctor, you can only take the one that is celiac. You need to follow protocol. He didn't. He put the 3 of them. He wanted to test something. Guess what? The 3 of them improved dramatically. The 3. So he kept the 3 gluten-free. Now, one of them moved from Christchurch. I don't know if it was Auckland or Sydney, but they moved from the area, and they took all the medical files with them. As the mother arrived to the new location and registered herself and the family to a new doctor, the doctor checked the file, and he said to the mother, "How is it that your daughter is not eating wheat or gluten? She's not celiac. Go back into eating the wheat and the gluten." And very, very soon, that daughter went sick. extremely sick again. He was turning back to the original sick condition. So the mother did something that mothers ought not to do. She didn't listen to the doctor. And she decided to remove the wheat again. And very soon, the daughter improved. Now, my understanding is that that girl then grew up into an adult, and she is a school teacher, primary school teacher, living happily, gluten-free. Okay? So Dr. Ford is definitely one of the pioneers, one of the voices that for much longer years than myself, I'm not bringing anything original. You know, we all building into on top of the work of other people. And he, even in the 80s and 90s, was already working in this area as a pediatrician. Okay? He also says this, and we need to understand the protocol. The first thing to do is to exclude celiac disease by normal TTG tests. Okay? If that says positive, then the doctor will tell you that you need to get a biopsy. Okay? And they will do a biopsy, and they will take a sample, and the biopsy will probably confirm that you're celiac. Okay? But the next point to understand is that the gluten sensitivity test, the IgG gliadin antibody, what does it say next? Is not 100% accurate test. It's the best that we've got, for sure, but it's not 100% accurate. So, if the test says no, but your tummy says I bloat, which one is the test? The tummy. Are you getting that? So the IgG test is the best we've got, but it is not 100% accurate. So how do we figure out them? Well, Dr. Ford goes on to say, finally understand that the diagnosis of gluten sensitivity or gluten-related illnesses is primarily an elimination and challenge exercise. What does that mean? A challenge exercise. So what would I do if I need to work it out, if I do better without gluten? Well, I will do a 6-week challenge. Why 6 weeks? Because if gluten is actually, or parts of the wheat proteins are actually influencing my health, I'll probably need the first 2 weeks to do a little bit of a detox of it anyhow. And then I'll probably be able to see the results from the 2nd week onwards. Now, I had a patient. She went on a 6 weeks gluten-free challenge. So for 6 weeks, no gluten whatsoever. Nothing that had contained gluten. She was not consuming anything that contained gluten. Now, in the first week, now the only thing that we have done, we haven't actually introduced anything. The only thing that we did was take out something, okay? Now this is very important for you to understand with what I'm about to say, but let's say that you get a new medication and you start having headaches. What is causing you headache? The medication, okay? You get a new medication and you become constipated. You start taking iron capsules, iron tablets, and you get constipated. What is causing the constipation? The iron, okay? So you start getting milk thistle, and all of a sudden you start having an adverse reaction, and you're waking up at 2 o'clock in the morning every day ever since you started taking that medication or milk thistle. So you are taking something in, and because you're taking something in, then you're suffering something. You following? Now, in this patient's case, she didn't take anything new. She just took gluten out. And the moment she took gluten out, within the 2nd, 3rd day, she started developing flu-like symptoms. Now, what I'm going to share with you is the worst case that I haven't seen. Okay, normally it's not like this, but in her case, in 3 days, she called me and said, I'm pouring down my nose mucus like never before. And I got a headache, and I'm pouring mucus, and I'm not stopping. It's like I got a hay fever. And I never had hay fever, and just pouring it out and pouring it out. Now, She says to me, it must be the gluten. And I said, I thought you took it out. I said, I did. Are you catching it? How is she having a reaction to gluten when she just stopped taking it? She's detoxing big time. She always spoke with a very nasal voice. Very nasal? Like a person that has the sinuses quite loaded. Because you know that the sinuses, they produce part of the sound of your voice by the echoing. So if the sinuses are filled up with mucus, then you have a little bit of nasal sound. Okay? So she was pouring and pouring. By the 5th day, she said, oh man, how much mucus is in there? She was feeling like she was with the flu. She didn't feel energy. And she kept on saying, it must be the gluten. I said, you are not taking it. By the 5th day, she started feeling better. By the 7th day, she felt much better. And then she continued feeling better all throughout. She had a tremendous detox. I've never seen it that severe like that girl. But at the end of 6 weeks, when she came to see me, she was not nasal anymore. She didn't sound like this anymore. She just cleared up all that. It was amazing, amazing to see. So what is a 6 weeks challenge involve? That's what I will do if I wanted to test if I am actually improved generally in my condition if I remove the gluten. Or if I want to find out if the gluten has something that it does to me in a non-positive way and the test is not able to pick it up. Okay? So I will just do this. I will remove all gluten containing grains. So that is wheat, barley, rye, spelt, kamut, oats, and all their products, flours, breads, pizzas. Now, in the first presentation of this program, we talked about the emmer wheat. Remember? Emmer wheat. It's still a wheat. And the thing is that if wheat and gluten is making an issue in your body by bringing a very close cousin of the current wheat, is not helping. Okay? Sometimes, all right, put it this way. Let's say a Spaniard places a bomb in one important place in the United States of America, for instance, or in a very important country in the world, and it's a Spaniard. And then another Spaniard puts another bomb, and then another Spaniard puts another bomb. Now, I am from Spain. I just go through a passport area in an airport. I show my Spanish passport, because I've got both Australian and Spanish passport. I show my Spanish passport, and how are they going to treat me? They're going to treat me as suspicious. They're going to treat me as, hold on a second, this guy might be a criminal. Because the Spanish people have been planting bombs. All of a sudden, in the psyche of the human mind, every Spaniard is a bomb threat terrorist, right? In the same way, your limbic system that has had an encounter with adverse effects from wheat, it will see the emmer at this point at least, and it will go, hey, hold on a second, I don't trust this guy. All right? So for the 6 weeks, at least for the 6 weeks, you're better off no wheat, no gluten, or grains that contain gluten. And that includes the barley, the rye, the spelt, the kamut, the roll oats. Why the roll oats and why roll oats have a mark on it? Because roll oats or oats do not have gluten in it. They have another protein called avenina. So we've got some Spanish-speaking people here. That's why we call it avena. Avenina. And avenina is just a cousin of gluten. Okay, it's just a cousin. But sometimes cousins are so closely related that we don't want to give a misinformation. You know, it's like I'm going there as a Spaniard and they will stop me. My wife will go as a Chilean and say, well, it's the same thing. Spanish, Chilean, the same thing, right? So we want to make sure that even if they are cousins, we don't get confused inside our limbic system. And besides that, it is well known that the crops will be planted first oats, and then in the same field there will be wheat. and then it will be oats, and then there will be wheat, and then oats and wheat. So there will be some oats in the wheat and some wheat in the oats. Okay, that's why you find in some of the places these oats, gluten-free oats. Have you seen those? The one, the ones that come in a little box and they cost 4 times more? Those ones. Gluten-free oats are because rather than actually being planted as a crop, as an interchangeable crop with wheat, they will probably use oats, soy, then you won't have wheat coming up when you plant the oats, okay? And then they test it. They actually test how the level of gluten that is present, okay? And they guarantee that is a certain amount of units of gluten per certain amount of quantity, okay? So that's why the oats, at least for the 6 weeks, is there. And all their products, their flours, their breads, their pizzas, I need to specify that because there's people that think gluten and they think in gluten steaks, they think in vegetarian sausages, they think in, I don't know what they're thinking, but gluten is found in a lot of places. So one of the things that you need to do is read the labels. Or I will do will be read the labels. Some of the stock cubes, soy sauces have gluten because they are having soy and they're having wheat. Baby formulas. Now that's interesting. Probably most of you won't be drinking that one, but there are actually some suggestions in some of the Scandinavian countries. So you have Sweden, Finland, Norway, and you also have Denmark. That's the Scandinavian countries. And I don't remember now which one was which, but one of them used in their formula a byproduct of the wheat to make the powder. So it had a higher level of gluten than the rest of the countries. And just happens that that country, one of those Scandinavian countries, has higher levels of celiac than the others. But in their formula, they have more gluten than the other 3. Okay, and the old Scandinavians. Okay, so thickening agents, multivitamins, drugs, coloring agents, salsas and sauces, MSG, doesn't have gluten, but it's not good for you. So I just put it in there. Just making sure that the MSG that doesn't have gluten, but it's not good for you anyway. The dextrin starches, okay? When it says dextrin starches, they can come from corn or they can come from wheat, okay? And if you don't know from which one it comes from, might as well just avoid them. In fact, in many instances, the reason why they don't specify if it comes from the wheat or if it comes from the corn is because it depends on the market. So a product that uses dextrin, they will go into the market and they'll say, this week, how much is the wheat one? Is so much per kilogram. How much is the corn one? So much per kilogram. Or this week, the corn is cheaper, so they'll use the corn. But you never know if next week the wheat is going to be cheaper and they will use the wheat. That's why in the label they don't specify it, because that allows them to grab from the market whatever's cheaper at a time. Okay? So yeast spreads. So what else? I thought for the same money, might as well, I include it in the bag. All dairy, because but with concern mainly with the lactose, okay? So when we're talking about yogurt, for instance, in the dairy, we're looking at commercial yogurt. If you are able to make a yogurt in the house that you can remove all the lactose by allowing enough time of fermentation, and you have 0 lactose there, that would probably be acceptable. But everything else that is in there, just for the 6 weeks of challenge, is better off to take off. So the butter, the ghee, the cheese, the cottage cheese, the cream cheese, the evaporated milk, ice cream, milk, sour cream, etc. Why? Because lactose might have an issue, and it's contributing issue too. So I thought, since you're going to do the effort, since I'm going to do the effort, I might as well just take another biggie out, okay, for the same price. right? So I thought, for the same price, might as well just take the soy out. It's just for the same price. Why? Why am I taking the soy out? Anyone? Because there's actually people that react to soy. Now, soy is very, very good unless it's very, very bad for you. If soy is very, very bad for you, then for you it's not good. When people ask me, what do you think of coconut oil? Coconut oil, very, very, very good for you, unless it is very, very bad for you. Because there are people that react to coconut oil. Do you know that? There's actually people that eat coconut oil and they make themselves very sick. Now, coconut oil is antifungus, right? I know of people, and it is antifungus, and you have a fungus, for instance, in your toes and between your toes, and you put coconut oil, and because it's antifungus, it will fix it, right? In some cases, it does. It works. But I actually know the odd case in which they put that and the whole thing is spread like crazy. So, coconut oil, very, very good for you, unless it is bad for you. So, soy, we know that is good. It has complete protein, it has good levels of protein, etc. But in some cases, it's not actually good for an individual. And if the person is already showing issues with wheat, it might be showing issues with soy. Are you following? If wheat has already done a damage, the protein of the soy can do further damage in it, because the wheat has already opened up that hyperpermeability that we spoke about in the second lecture. Okay? So we have soy protein powder, tamari and soy sauce, tempeh, texture vegetable protein, tofu, vitamin E. And I thought, for the same money, let's go to take this biggie. That's the corn. Now, if wheat has been played with, this fella here has been played with more. The corn has actually been played quite a lot. So, if I decide to go through the effort, I'll say, might as well just take off the corn just in case. Just in case the corn. Does corn have gluten in it? Corn doesn't have gluten. Corn does not have gluten, but it can actually be an issue. It's a carrier of fungus in most cases, and people are actually responding to that fungus that is carried in the corn, and they have manipulated the corn in an amazing, amazing way. So where is corn found? In some baking powders, in corn flour, corn on the cob, corn tortillas, cornmeal, cornstarch, dextrose, food starch, frozen corn, high fructose corn syrup. I was in the States, in Arizona, and they were telling me that the Latino people there, they actually buy the Coca-Cola that comes from Mexico. When they go to Costco, they get the Coca-Cola from Mexico, and they don't want to drink the Coca-Cola from the States. And I said, why not? Why from Mexico? It's because the Mexican one, they use sugar to sweeten it. The American one use corn syrup to sweeten it, and you actually gain more weight with the corn syrup one than with the sugar one. Polenta, sorbitol, vegetable gum, vegetable protein, vegetable starch, sunshine gum. Okay? Now, I thought for the same price, if you can avoid, for the same price, it's going to cost you the same thing. If you can avoid as much as possible caffeine, alcohol, and tobacco, and soft drinks and sugar, for the same price, I will say, I'll tell you what, if you can do this, you will notice a difference, I'm sure. If it's not the wheat, it's going to be something else in the list. What are you going to eat, friends? What are you going to eat? Now you're noisy. You've been quiet all through the seminar. Now you're noisy. That's good. That's good. Okay, what are we going to eat? Well, rice doesn't have gluten. Okay? Now, basmati and or brown rice. try to avoid jasmine rice, okay? So whatever you actually found with jasmine actually releases too much insulin, okay? So it is much better basmati, okay? If you have some jasmine rice in the house, I mean, don't throw it away. Don't you have an enemy that you can give it to or something? But besides that, so basmati is good, you know. And look, people sometimes they look at me and they're not sure, you know. So when I say rice, they say brown rice, right? Because they're expecting me to say brown rice. But when I say you can have basmati, and they go, do you eat basmati? I say, I do. Thank you. And then they go home and the first thing that they cook is basmati. And they say, how are you cooking basmati rice? I say, Oscar cooks basmati too in the house. Does he? I say, then it should be all right. So I just release all the pressure from your heads. Right now you can have basmati rice, okay? It's quicker. I have 5 children in the house. I have a very hungry teenager. And when he's hungry, he doesn't have 40 minutes to wait for the brown rice to cook, you know? So we do cook basmati rice in the house too. So this will play the role of your grains as such through these 6 weeks, okay? The basmati will play, all the brown rice, will play its role there. Buckwheat, you can use that, you can cook it, you can get buckwheat pancake mix. You can actually, if you have powerful blenders or the Thermomix and a few other things like that, you can make a flour out of it and you can make it, you can put the things that you normally put in pancakes and you can make a pancake of buckwheat, for instance. You can use the same pancake as flatbreads. And then you can put it in savory. You can put your avocado, you can put your tomato, you can put your things and roll it over and you eat it. So that can be an option, okay? Almond meal and other nuts flours. There's actually plenty of recipes of how to actually make different small roll breads and so on, even sandwich breads with almond meal, and they use like coconut flour and they make like a nice bread. For those 6 weeks. Quinoa flakes or very well cooked quinoa. Quinoa flakes are a great alternative for rollouts if you're used to porridge. Okay? And notice which one I'm putting first. I'm putting the quinoa flakes before the actual quinoa. You know why? Because sometimes people don't know how to cook the quinoa properly, and the quinoa, if it's not cooked properly and you're not used to it, it can actually be irritant, and all of a sudden you ate it here and not half an hour, but maybe 4 hours later, you see the quinoa. You see it on the other end and it's just nice and intact. Okay? So if you know a Peruvian friend of yours, ask the Peruvian, how do they cook the quinoa? Quinoa needs to end up very fluffy, no grainy, but very fluffy when it's cooked, okay? There are tutorials on YouTube of how to cook fluffy quinoa. It has to be fluffy, okay? Not grainy, not sort of granularly, you know, like you're eating sand, pieces of sand. No, it has to be nice and fluffy, okay? So go to YouTube, tutorials for cooking fluffy quinoa, tutorials to cook the quinoa the Peruvian way, all those things. Otherwise, quinoa as a whole can actually not be helpful in this situation. And you're going for a healthy alternative and all of a sudden, I don't know, I feel more bloated now that I'm eating the quinoa, okay? Quinoa flakes, on the other hand, are already semi-processed into the flaky state and are easier to digest, and they can be used for breakfast, okay? So you got millet and sorghum. Millet, you can also use that for breakfast. Make sure that you soak it. So you soak it before you cook it. Normally these grains, all grains in fact, but they have a little toxin all around the outside to prevent birds from eating them. So they need to be soaked and washed to remove that little toxin on the outside of the element, okay? But I know that some of you just stopped here. They just stopped on the basmati rice. That's fine, okay? Indians just stopped in the basmati rice too for 6 weeks and for 6 years, okay? So some of you, For some of you, the option is basmati rice. You can also have, for instance, tapioca, gluten-free bread. Now, if I was in Australia, I will tell you about in Coles and Woolworths supermarket, which are the two major supermarkets, and some other IGAs and so on. They'll have, there's a brand called Country Life, and there is a gluten-free bread that says low GI, and it has a lot of almond meal in it as part of the bread. And if you toast that bread, it's actually quite nice as to have sandwiches and etc. So the idea is not to deprive yourself, but rather to find substitutes. So if you're used to the bread, you just get the gluten-free bread, one that is yummy. So in Australia, for those listening in Australia, it will be the Country Life low GI gluten-free bread. That will be a good option. Now in your country, I will have no idea. You'll probably have to taste and see, or ask somebody that has been on a gluten-free diet for a while and they already know by playing an error which one is better. Now you ought to feel very, very blessed to be able to do this challenge in this time in history. If you had to do this challenge 10 years ago, when we first started with our daughter, gluten-free bread, that was the most disgusting thing on earth. That thing was sticky, it was just, it was heavy, tasteless, it was awful. Nowadays, it has improved a lot. And if you are a little bit of a cook, there's plenty of recipes also online for that. So gluten-free bread, the idea is that you're not taking away, you're just substituting. Okay? Buckwheat crackers. So you have the buckwheat crackers, nice thin crackers, and you put all whatever things on top to eat, buckwheat crackers. Rice, noodles, and pasta. What type of pasta is going to be if it's gluten-free? It has to be rice or quinoa, or rice and quinoa, because what is the other alternative there that is there available as a gluten-free pasta? Corn. But it's preferably for you to avoid the corn for these next 6 weeks. So if it is corn pasta, don't eat it. Now, rice noodles, if you don't go through the Italian section in the supermarket with all the pastas and the tomato sauce and so on, you just walk down 2 corridors and you go through the Asian section, you get all these rice noodles. Make sure these rice noodles, not wheat noodles. But you have them, the thick ones that look like fettuccine, you got the small ones that look like spaghetti and so on, and they don't have the label of gluten-free, so they're cheaper. Because the other ones have the label of gluten-free, and because they have to write gluten-free, that's extra ink, so the produce is more expensive. Did you get that? Okay, good. I need to put a caution. There are a number of products that are also gluten-free. For instance, let me see. Yeah. Marijuana is gluten-free. So, just because it says gluten-free does not make it healthy. Are you understanding what I'm saying? Now, there is a whole level of commerce about the gluten-free industry nowadays. Okay, when you go to supermarkets, you know, gluten-free this, gluten-free that. And I remember the time I was in one state in Victoria, in Australia, outside of my state, and this lady came and said, I watch your videos, I watch your programs, and me and my daughter, we are gluten-free, we're loving it. I said, you're loving it? How are you finding it? Easy. Wow, that must be a first, because normally people are feeling like, what am I going to eat, you know? And she's thriving on it. I said, okay. I could see, I said, how long have you been on it? I said, we have been like 5 weeks now. Have you lost any weight? I said, no, not much. I said, that's interesting. So, but you're enjoying it though? I said, yeah. And your daughter? Also, that's interesting because children normally are more fussy, you know? And I said, okay. Oh yeah, we go to the shopping center. and my daughter just runs to the section, the gluten-free section, and she loves it. There's some chocolate cookies there, all gluten-free. She loves it, and we've been enjoying them, and so nice. You know what, Oscar? I'm not much of a cook. You will never find me in the kitchen. But now that I'm gluten-free, this is so easy. You just go there to one of these, you get like a chocolate forest cake. It comes in a box like that. You take it home. You open the packet. It was amazing. It's all powdered. You put it in a container. You add the water. You read, okay, add 1.5 liters. You add the water. You mix it well. You put it in a tray. You put it in the oven. 20 minutes later, Oscar, there's the forest chocolate cake. It was so easy. I'm not much of a cook, but now that I'm gluten-free, man, I enjoy my time in the kitchen. That is not what we aiming in these 6 weeks. You understand that, right? That's not what we aiming. We are not aiming to ignore totally whatever knowledge we have of health already, disregard it completely, and just go by a label. Why? Because marijuana is also gluten-free, and I won't recommend you that. Okay? So, what happens next? What happens after the 6 weeks? Well, we got the 6-week challenge, and we have a number of options. I remember one lady, she had some skin issues and some intestinal issues, and I actually convinced her to go on the 6 weeks challenge. By the 4th week, the skin was clearing up. Now, bear in mind that she had this skin issue for the last 2 years. She's been with corticosteroid creams, she had a number of things. By the 4th to 5th week, the skin was clearing up. So in the middle of the 5th week, she called me and said, and I said to her, how is the skin going? She said, great, Oscar, great. It's finally clearing up. I'm feeling good. But I'm just on my week 5.5. I've got another half of a week to go. What is she thinking? The moment I finished and I'm going back. That was a sad case. Why? Because that was a very clear evidence that she was actually gaining a benefit, because she carried skin issues for 2 years, and those issues were clearing up by the 5th week, but she could not wait to go back. And you know what? She was totally entitled to do so. Totally entitled. Some people do this and they don't actually find much of a difference. Guess what? If you haven't found much of a difference, after the 6 weeks challenge, you just had a cleanse. You just had a rest. You just had a cleanse. You're going to feel good anyhow. Okay? Even if you decide that, okay, I just done it. I've done a challenge. Okay? And it's good to do a challenge. It's good for the mind. Okay? I wanted to run a marathon, I ran a marathon. I wanted to cross Australia on a push bike, I crossed Australia with a push bike. I wanted to complicate my life, I had 5 children. It's only good to have challenges. Okay? So, after the 6 weeks, let's say you decide, I'm just going to do it for a bit of a cleanse. I'm just going to do it just to help my friend, to help my spouse, to help my wife, whatever. And you stick to it and see if you can actually do it. Let me tell you, it's much easier than 6 weeks on juices. Okay, because here you still got your bread, it's just gluten-free bread. You still got your rice, I haven't taken that away. You still have your noodles. So you just substituted things. Okay, so it's much easier. You're still eating. So, and then you have that sense of accomplishment. Look, one day I've done, one time I did 6 weeks gluten-free. That's on your record. That's on your things that I did. What am I missing now? Climb Mount Everest. Well, that's more difficult. But the 6 week is easy. And then what I'll recommend you to do is this. If you have already made up your mind that you are going to go back, you've got 1 week to go and you're going back, fine. What I'll recommend you to do, have a festival on the day after you finish. Make sure you have a nice wheat breakfast, a couple of slices of bread or whatever, a nice pasta dish, and and a few other things. Whatever wheat you can think of, just get wheat the next day, nice, in every meal if possible. You're going to get so sick. Sometimes it's like we're carrying a 20-kilo backpack, and it's full of sand, and somebody makes a little tiny hole, and as you're walking along, you're not even realizing that backpack is actually lighter and lighter. Okay? But at the end of your journey, if somebody puts the 20 kilos back all of a sudden at once, you go, man, that's heavy, because you didn't realize the slow process through the 6 weeks. If after that festival of wheat that you're going to give yourself the very next day, you feel fine, congratulations. You have actually beat Monsanto. You actually are a strong individual with a very strong digestive system, and nothing will kill you. Okay? So that's what I would recommend you. After the 6 weeks, there's another thing that you can do. You can just choose to reduce your gluten and wheat your wheat and gluten intake. You say, okay, I actually feel better, and I'm just going to try to reduce it. Those 6 weeks have given you a time to experiment with new recipes, new ideas, etc. So that actually enlarges your kitchen, enlarges your table, okay? And you can choose that. And you can go, all right, well, I'm just going to try things like, in order to reduce the wheat, and I'll probably use the spelt. That will be a good time to introduce, for instance, if you want to, the emmer, or breads made out of emmer, for instance. That is, of course, if you haven't noticed much of a difference. So if you notice that you feel lighter, you have lost some weight, etc., and you go, all right, well, I'm just going to find myself a little bit in the middle. I'm going to reduce the wheat intake, and I'm just going to get healthier options, and etc. You're entitled to do that. Alternatively, you can go, if possible, remain 0 gluten. Okay? So you felt good. You felt that definitely gluten was affecting your fluid retention. The gluten was affecting your weight retention, that it was affecting your bloatiness, etc., etc., etc. And you notice a big difference. You say, hold on a second, I have already been shown what is good for me. I've done the test, and actually I look better, I feel better after the 6 weeks. So I'm going to do my best to remain gluten-free. Okay? And that's what I will call a flexitarian approach. Okay? So you are trying your best to do your best. Okay? And with the conscience that you say, okay, if I eat wheat, I don't feel good, so I'm just going to, as far as I can, be without it. Now, why am I saying a flexitarian? Because when I'm out of my house, I'm a flexitarian. Because I cannot expect people to accommodate to me, to my liking and whatever I have. So, for instance, Oscar is going to stay at our house. I go to do seminars in different places. Now, it's interesting because if I do, for instance, a church seminar, you will think people will be raising their hands to have me in their house, right? They petrified, they don't want me there. Because it's panicky. What are we going to feed this guy, right? I need to keep on reminding them I'm a flexitarian when I'm out of the house. Whatever you put in front of me, I will just give thanks and I will enjoy your company, all right? So I go to a house. This lady has actually removed all the dust from the bread maker and has actually done the special trip to the health food shop to get the most gluten-enriched flour and make a nice bread out of that bread maker. And then she has gone out of her way to ask one of her friends to teach her how to do gluten steaks. And she has this recipe for gluten steaks and chickpea mash. And she uses the gluten and the chickpea mash, and she makes these gluten steaks. And I walk through the house and the smell of bread is already present. Okay? And she is so proud of it. She has gone that extra mile. Should I go that extra mile for her? Absolutely. And I don't apologize for that. I sit at the table. She presents the bread before me. And I'm just wondering, what am I going to use this bread with when she brings the main dish? And the main dish is just gluten steak loaded everywhere. And she tells me a story. I just gone to a friend of mine. She told me I spent all afternoon just trying to work this out. I would spend all the afternoon in her house, and I went the next day and we started making it, and I think they taste all right. Because you do eat gluten, do you? I am going to love this one. It looks good. It smells delicious. I'm going to enjoy it. Shall we pray and give thanks? And I just thank for the gluten. I enjoy it. I enjoy it with Thanksgiving. I enjoy it with the company. That's what I mean by a flexitarian. Then, I carry with me a little bottle of sweetest bitters. So, sweetest bitters is in my backpack. And then, when I just loaded myself with glutinous steaks and very enriched gluten bread, I said, that was delicious. You are a great cook. That was absolutely fantastic. I really enjoyed it because it tasted good. Okay? I'm not lying. It tasted good. It was delicious. I let myself be led by the Thanksgiving that I had provided before the lunch. And then I get up, go to my bedroom, grab the sweetest bitters, and said, would you be able to show me where the bathroom is? And she shows me the bathroom, and I go to the bathroom, I get my sweetest bitters, which is going to help me with my digestion, and I'll just get a little glass there, and I drink it, so I can have a nice digestion here, okay? So I've been polite, I've been well educated, my mom educated me well, I am flexible when I need to be flexible, and I have a place to sleep that night too, okay? So those are some of the approaches. Now, bear in mind that this is a protocol that is extremely general. We're not taking into account your condition, if you are diabetic, if you have high blood pressure, if you have other issues, if you are malnourished already, we're not taking any of that into account, okay? This is just a very standalone protocol of a 6 weeks wheat and gluten-free challenge. Of course, with all the extras, just because it costs the same. Okay? So anything in particular beyond that, you'll probably have to make a consultation, and we need to study more in detail your case. I hope the challenge is taken seriously, and if you think that it will be of benefit to you, I will encourage you to get a partner. Get a partner and do it with a partner. Why? Because there's nothing more horrible than coming home from work and your children are eating spaghetti when you are gluten-free that week or over the next 6 weeks. Okay? If your spouse and yourself, you get together and you do it together, you encourage each other. All right? In the Tour de France, you don't start from the beginning to the end and be the yellow jersey in the Tour de France by going by yourself. You need somebody that will cut the wind for you. All right? So make sure you get a partner to do it, and let me know. Once you've done that, let me know. Send me an email. We're always looking for what we call testimonies and people that would like to share their experience. We receive many emails every day with testimonies from people. We'd like to hear from you. Just go to our website, contact us, send us an email of your experience, how it went through those 6 weeks. Beyond that, I want to thank you for your attendance, and until another occasion, may God bless you.